Today, I'm going to talk about the correct way to bend, and that is once you have found your neutral posture, which I recorded in another segment, you want to do what's called a hip hinge. And a hip hinge, I'm going to demonstrate, is where you are standing in that lovely, nice, upright, neutral posture, and you bend at the hips, and you don't bend at the spine. The reason you want to bend this way is that when you bend using the spine and round your back, all the vertebrae in your back have to move separately, and they're held together with lots of little teeny muscles. And so when you round your back, your joints are put on stretch in the spine, as well as all those little muscles are working individually to pull you up when you're coming up, or lower you down when you're going down. Instead, if you hip hinge, where you're maintaining that neutral alignment, you are using all the muscles that attach around the spine congruently. They all co-contract around the spine to maintain a more stable unit. We all remember from back to math, the sum of all parts is greater than each individual part. So you are inherently more stable by bending in what's called a hip hinge than bending like this, because all the muscles are working together. Okay? So now I'm going to have Brent come in, and I'm going to teach him how to perform a hip hinge. So what you would do is he's going to stand in his neutral posture where everything is aligned, his shoulder is over his hip, and his weight is evenly distributed between the balls of his feet and his heels. And he's going to bend his knees slightly, and that's just to relax the hamstrings, because most people have tight hamstrings. And what he's going to do is he's going to hinge forward, sticking his tush out, his buttocks out, and keeping his back nice and straight like a board. All right, and then come back. Now, if he was to do it wrong, well, actually, first, let's have him do this. Hold on to a stick. You can get a broom stick, a Swifter, a hockey stick. You can, anything that is just a upright pole. And what he's going to do is he's going to do a hip hinge now with that. So let me have you hinge forward, sticking his tush out, and it moves back. And then come back up. Now, Brent, I want you to do it incorrectly to show everyone how incorrectly. So he's going to round through his back, and you see that the relationship between the stick and his body is not the same as it was when he was upright. So if you're starting in a neutral position and you want to end in a neutral position, then the relationship between your body and the stick should remain constant. So he's going to hinge and back up, and hinge and back up. And I encourage you to practice this with a stick to make sure that you're doing it correctly. The most common mistake I see is people don't move their butt back enough. And they don't, and so then they were forced to bend through their spine. You see how he's moving away. Whereas, so if you look, when he hip hinges correctly, his hip joint goes all the way back here. It started here, and now it's all the way back here. Okay? If you think about it, it's the same way that when we sit down in a chair, we put our tush back, and to sit on the chair. It's the same concept as that. So now let's show how we do it practically. So Brent, why don't you demonstrate picking up the med ball with a hip hinge. So he's going down, he's bending his knees and coming back up. Now, Brent has really flexible hamstrings. Most of us might need to bend our knees more to get lower. But if you noticed, he widened his base of support, so he spread his legs out so he could then bend down to pick it up. And he hip hinged. Now, another thing that's important is when you're down there, let me have you go down, is the weight, and particularly if it's a very heavy weight, is going to be pulling on your back, as well as gravity. So what you want to do is contract your transversus abdominal muscles, which are right here, to stabilize here before you lift something that is heavy. That is your God-given girdle, and it helps support your core and prevent you from getting a back injury. So why don't you do that and lift up. Now, in CrossFit, we use the barbells. And so Brent's now going to demonstrate the correct way to utilize a hip hinge where you're doing when you're lifting the bar. So why don't you go ahead? Yep. And now he's going to lift up and down. And when he goes down, yeah. And so you notice that his back is nice and straight. And a common mistake we see when people are weightlifting is they round in their back a lot instead of maintaining it straight, and they lift, and when they lift, all that stress of lifting is in the low back, and they develop back pain. So that's why Brent works closely at CrossFit Forgiven to utilize that hip hinge where you're really sticking your buttocks back when you go down to do a lift. Thank you.